Today, we are diving into a story from the Talmud that's almost 2,000 years old. And let me tell you, it is a wild ride. We're talking about a river that apparently talks back, a donkey that's maybe a little too pious for its own good, and a debate so heated it literally moves a mountain. But underneath all of that is this incredibly deep exploration of what it really means to be righteous. So let's get into it.
So think about this for a second. What kind of person, what kind of sheer force of will does it take to walk up to a raging river and tell it to stop? I mean, it sounds like something straight out of a movie, right? But for one man, Rabbi Pineḥas, this was apparently just another day on the job.
So here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at the big, spectacular miracle with the river. Then, we're going to zoom way in on a much smaller, but, just as revealing story about his donkey. From there, it gets really interesting with a high-stakes ethical standoff. And finally, we'll tie it all together to figure out the incredible price and the incredible power of having principles.
All right, part 1. A man commands a river.
Okay, so picture this. Rabbi Pineḥas is on a super important mission, redeeming captives, which is one of the biggest commandments you can do in Judaism. But his path is completely cut off by the roaring Ginai River. He has got to cross, and he's got to cross right now.
So Rabbi Pineḥas just commands the river to part, and this is where the story gets really wild, because the text gives the river a voice, and the river basically argues back. It says, look, you're trying to do God's will, but who knows if you'll actually succeed? Me, I am definitely doing God's will right this second just by flowing. My job is a sure thing, yours isn't. It's this amazing standoff between two completely different ways of serving the divine.
Rabbi Pineḥas doesn't even bother arguing. He just escalates. He basically tells the river, if you don't part for me this instant, I will make sure you can never do your job ever again. And while faced with an ultimatum like that, the river doesn't have much of a choice. The waters part.
And this next part, this is where the story just brilliantly shows us the kind of man he is. The river doesn't just part once, it parts 3 times. First, for the rabbi and his holy mission, that makes sense. But then it parts a second time for a farmer who was doing his communal duty, getting ready for Passover. And finally, it parts a 3rd time for his non-Jewish guide, not for any holy reason, but just out of basic human courtesy.
I mean, this event was so huge, so mind-blowing, that the other sages could only compare it to the most famous parting of the waters ever, Moses at the Red Sea. They actually debate if maybe Rabbi Pineḥas was even greater, since he did it 3 separate times. Just the fact that they're having that conversation tells you the scale of power we're talking about here.
Okay, so we've seen this massive, cosmic-level miracle. Now we're going to zoom all the way in to something much smaller. Part 2. Even his donkey was righteous. So, after crossing the river, the rabbi stops at an inn for the night. The innkeepers bring out some barley for his donkey, but the animal just won't eat. They figure something must be wrong with the grain, so they sift it, they clean it out, and still nothing. The donkey will not touch it. What is going on?
To get why, we need a quick little definition. In Jewish law, you have to separate a certain portion of your produce for sacred purposes. It's called tithing. Any produce that hasn't been tithed yet is called tevel, and you are forbidden from eating it.
Okay, but here's the legal twist. Normally, you don't actually have to tithe animal feed. But, and this is a big but, there's an exception. If the grain was originally meant for a person to eat and only later was set aside for animals, then it does have to be tithed. So the only way this makes sense is if the innkeeper grabbed this barley from his own personal stash.
Rabbi Pineḥas puts it all together in an instant. He asks the innkeepers, hey, did you guys tithe this barley? They hadn't. So they tithe it. And boom, the donkey immediately starts eating. It's this incredible idea that the rabbi's righteousness is so powerful it literally radiates outward, and even his donkey instinctively knows not to do something that isn't right.
So we've seen his power over nature and his influence over the animal kingdom, but now comes the real test, a messy, complex human problem. Part 3, a standoff over mules. So on his way back, Rabbi Pineḥas is invited to dinner with another giant of the era, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, who is basically the leader of the entire Jewish people. But as he gets to the house, he sees something that stops him cold. White mules, which at the time were known to be incredibly dangerous and aggressive animals.
And his reaction is just extreme. He doesn't say, oh, that looks unsafe. No, he says, the angel of death is in this person's house and I'm supposed to eat with him? For him, knowingly keeping a clear and present danger like that around isn't just irresponsible, it's a deep spiritual problem, and he refuses to go inside.
Rabbi Yehuda comes out and he tries to solve it, right? He offers up one practical solution after another, but as you can see, Rabbi Pineḥas shuts every single one down, on principle. Rabbi Yehuda says, okay, fine, I'll sell them. Rabbi Pineḥas says, no, you're just passing the danger on to someone else. All right, I'll just abandon them. Nope, that makes the potential for damage even worse. What if we maim them so they can't hurt anybody? That's causing needless suffering to an animal. Fine, we'll kill them. Can't do that. It violates the rule against needless destruction. For every single practical answer, Rabbi Pineḥas has an ethical roadblock.
There is just no easy answer here. And this brings us to our final section, the price of principle.
The two men are at a total impasse. Rabbi Yehuda cannot find a single solution that meets Rabbi Pineḥas's absolute moral standards. And the text says their argument becomes so intense, so immovable, that a mountain literally rises up out of the ground between them, physically forcing them apart. The landscape itself had to reshape to reflect just how unbridgeable their disagreement was.
And how does Rabbi Yehuda react? You'd think he'd be angry, right? But he's not. He's in awe. He starts to cry and says, if this is how powerful and unyielding the righteous are in their lifetimes, just imagine their spiritual presence after they've passed. He realizes he just came face to face with a force of principle as real and as immovable as a mountain.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? Well, this story is telling us that righteousness isn't just about being a good person. It's a force of nature. It's a power that can literally align the physical world with its purpose, like with the river. It's a quality so deep inside you that it extends to everything you own, like the donkey. And, maybe the hardest part, it's an absolute, unyielding commitment to principle, even when it's difficult, even when it causes conflict, just like that standoff over the mules.
Which of course leaves us with one last question to think about. It's pretty easy to stick to your principles when it's convenient. But this story pushes us to ask ourselves, what is the one principle you hold so deeply, so completely, that you would be willing to let a mountain rise between you and the rest of the world to defend it?